Good afternoon and welcome to the Positive Entrepreneur's View of Business. This afternoon we have a returnee, so we must have enjoyed the first one because he's come back for a second time. Good afternoon, Mr. Andrew Wheeler. How are we?
I'm very well indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Coates. I love the first one, especially with your charismatic appeal.
Well, thank you for your compliments. Obviously, charismatic is a compliment that I will take on board and probably put on as a testimonial on my sites everywhere. However, we do need to be serious, I'm afraid, today, because we are coming to the end of October, which sees the end of furlough. And I think you, like me, are very, very worried about redundancies, not just redundancies, but the amount that's going to happen, because there is no doubt that a lot has been masked by the furlough scheme and the SEISS scheme and the FFS scheme and every other scheme the government's come up with during this coronavirus period.
It is a worry, to be fair. I do feel for a lot of people out there, especially those who are on furlough currently, because you've got to question whether or not they're going to be taken back or whether they're going to be made redundant. But one of the first big plus points about it is the government did bring in an act a couple of months ago to make certain that anybody that does get made redundant is made redundant on their pre-furloughed salary, so that they are actually getting a proper redundancy payment.
And what should people be thinking about as this approaches?
The first thing is obviously looking for work elsewhere. The other obvious thing is looking at perhaps entrepreneurship, like your good self. When you're going to be getting your redundancy, you want to think, how can you make that money last as long as possible for you? So they may want to look at some kind of advice as to how they can invest their redundancy lump sums in the most tax efficient manner. Make certain they're maximising it for income, dependent, of course, on how much they're getting. If it's something that's going to be in the region of a few £100s, then make certain it goes down as an emergency fund to try to see you through the bad times whilst you're looking for work or finding work yourself alternatively. If it's a large sum of money, as I said earlier, perhaps looking at a way in which you can invest for income, because that means you're going to make it last a lot longer.
And of course, this will be a lot easier for companies that are corporates with people that are planning for this. But the small businesses and the small business owners, where should they sit regarding this? Because obviously they want to keep people in employment and they want to keep investing themselves, because that's where you make the money, by investing. How should small business owners be thinking to work alongside other people that have put people on furlough? Should they be looking to pivot? Should they be looking to make redundancies? Where should they sit?
It's a really good question, to be fair, and I suppose it comes to how integral that person is to their, or people are to their business. Unfortunately, as a small business owner, your cash flow is potentially going to be a lot tighter, both in and out, and so therefore you've got to make some potentially hard decisions or choices. I've seen some companies, perhaps on the smaller end of the spectrum, who have looked at offering their staff part-time hours. So redundancy, yes, but at the same time, we're happy to take you back on part-time until we know things are going to get better. So at least that way they've got some form of earnings rather than just being made flat out redundant. We've got a scheme that we look after where there's been, unfortunately, the best part of around 20 redundancies over a couple of months. But we are also talking of more than 100 employees. So when you take that into consideration, in the last month, they've actually had 3 new starters. So it just goes to show how things can change so quickly.
And of course, there is now a government scheme out that kind of helps us keep the 16 to 24-year-olds employed, called Kickstart. And obviously, this is not to, we've got to be very careful, because it's not to replace employees, is it? It's for completely new positions created.
So the Kickstart scheme is something that's been dreamt up. So to help employers hire younger people who may be on universal credit. You could argue they're the ones that are most affected by this, because you're going to have a large portion of them in the hospitality sector. What it does is actually give some grants to the employers so that they can take these people on and train them up within their company. And they've already had a very good response to this, which is really, really good to see.
So let's get down to the nitty-gritty, and what you're here for is obviously discuss the financial markets. You're a very, very good independent financial advisor working at East Mills Limited. Should we have a look at the UK, and then we'll go across the pond to the States, because obviously there's many, many other things that are affecting the States, including some election, I believe. I mean, it's not mentioned too much in the news at the moment. But let's start with the UK, and then we'll go across the pond, because I've heard that we're heading towards D-Day in the markets, and there's a prediction that Dow could lose 15,000 points in one single day very shortly. That's why the government over there are kicking money in like no end, aren't they?
I mean, that's obviously across the pond. We'll go on to that into a moment. But within the UK, we predominantly, in what's the main index of the FTSE 100, have banks, financial services, oil, which are all sectors that have been hit really hard by COVID. And so effectively that, unfortunately, although it's kind of stabilized around 6,000 points, does keep changing from 6.1 to 6.2, dropping back down to 5.9, back up to 6. It's just really staying around the same figure over a period of months. It's really, really difficult to figure out where the market is going next. But on the AIM market, it is actually done reasonably well. So those that are unlisted shares, perhaps more liquid, actually potentially have been growing. Across the pond, very different story. What you mentioned about the S&P is really interesting, but they're the only market, arguably, that's actually got back to pre-COVID levels, but on the basis of 5 companies, the big tech companies, you might want to call them the FANGs, but effectively, thanks to them, which effectively has a GDP as the same as Norway, just between the 5 of them, they've actually managed to bring it back up to where it was. If you took them out of it, you might see a very similar position than the FTSE. So it just goes to show, when you've got that kind of concentration of growth in just 5 companies, that is actually really scary and worrying. Just the other week, although it's not technically one of them, Tesla, who's done very well, especially since its SpaceX launch, had somewhere in the region of $1 billion, I believe, wiped off his balance sheet in a week. So it just goes to show how volatile things can be. But just on the basis of the other 5 tech companies, I think a lot of institutional investors were thinking they were overvalued, and they had a huge sell-off. And so if you actually look in the last couple of weeks, you will have seen a downturn. That was due to a massive sell-off in that sector because people were crystallizing their gains.
And of course, Exxon dropped out of the top 100 companies last week, didn't it?
It did indeed.
Quite worrying, isn't it, when a big company like that can't protect itself against the virus?
I think a lot of companies are really struggling, quite frankly, out there right now. As I say, the only ones where you continually see growth. And interestingly, I've got a funny feeling that after an announcement I saw the other day from Apple, you're probably going to see an uptick again in its share price because of its all new subscription 6-in-1 service potential. Very clever, very Amazon-esque, trying to do lots of services for a smaller amount or a savings. It just goes to show nothing is safe anymore. And so we've just got to continue along the way. The only issue we have potentially got coming up is the job losses, knock-on effects of earnings, profits quarterly produced. And that could again see an issue with the markets. Unfortunately, a lot of people are spooked at the moment and are emotional investors, which means volatility is here to stay for a while.
But of course, all we've done is set the scene. You know, we've not told anything that's not going on. And this is why the IFA is so important, because you see much of this come in. You obviously protect people's investments, pensions and things like that. So if you could just tell me the importance now of continuing to save into a pension, and also the immediate and long-term benefits it brings, and also the long-term benefits of investing, and also having the advice of your good self.
Okay, I'll try to cover all that off as quickly as possible.
No rush, honestly. There's not. The markets have closed for the day. It's gone 4 o'clock when we record this, so you carry on.
Okay, so what I would say is, with a pension, it's a long-term investment, dependent on your age, of course. And so you're in it for the long term. So everybody I've spoken to, whenever I've helped them with their retirement planning, which is predominantly what East Mills are specialists in, I've had very few calls whatsoever in relation to worries about their pension, because I've told them that it's a long-term investment. First thing you need to know about your pension. Second thing is, the importance of saving into a pension is massive, because regardless of what the markets are doing, you are guaranteed overnight a 25% return on your money. The reason you're guaranteed that level of growth is because you get what's called tax relief. So whether you're in a workplace pension scheme where your employer contributes, or whether you're self-employed and you're paying into a pension, or whether you're anybody that earns and is paying into a pension, you will always get back tax relief at basic rate in 99% of cases. I won't go into the 1%. And basically that means that if you have £100 gross paid to you by your employer, you get £80 net after income tax. Not strictly true because you've got national insurance as well. But if you pay £80 into a pension, it's grossed up to 100, which means you're getting a 25% return overnight on your money. Now, there's nowhere else that can guarantee that. This is guaranteed growth, and that's your tax relief. Then that purchases equities, amongst other assets, dependent on the way in which your portfolio is constructed. And that's where we come in to make certain the importance of asset allocation is key, in line with your financial goals and objectives. And that's what we are. We're financial planners. We don't just say this is better than this. We actually look at what you want to achieve and design the plan around that and update it on an ongoing basis and make certain that your financial well-being is key and that you're going to achieve the retirement you want regardless of market conditions. And that's why we make certain that we also build in market shocks into our plans so that we can plan for that going forward. Don't forget, if you are part of a workplace pension plan, the employer has to pay in, but only if you do. So it's really, really key that you continue paying in, and there'll be a minimum, depending on what band you pay in under, that you have to pay in order for your employer to pay. So potentially that could be 125% return overnight. And this is what I tell all of our scheme members who are on a certain band. So basic pay, for instance, 4% from the employer, 4% from the employee, 1% from the tax man. So your return is 125%. That is massive every month before it's even invested. And to me, that is just so key for any investment. You'd have to pay into it. There has been, unfortunately, some reports that some people have tried to reduce or opt out of pension schemes, but you can kind of understand that in the environment that we're in, especially among the younger staff, shall we say. And I think those are the ones that need to make certain they're paying more than anybody, because whatever's going into that scheme is yours. Whatever happens, it's your pension. It can't go away. And the markets will go up and down with it. But even in a workplace pension scheme, there'll be a default fund offering that makes certain that you de-risk towards your retirement. So when it comes towards your retirement, even if you don't have a good financial advisor like myself on hand, there will be a level of automation that means you're protected against market shocks, or some protection against market shocks, as you approach your retirement. The last thing you want to be is somebody who's completely invested in the stock market when you're really, really close to wanting to access your money. Because what happens if overnight that drops and all of a sudden your retirement plans are effective? And that's what we plan for as well. We're very, very specific towards people's goals and needs. So we go even further than the automation of a default fund does. And that's why for me, it's so key for everybody to be paying into the pension. But I can completely understand that in some cases, especially right now, that may not be physically possible. But I would encourage anybody out there who's opted out, if they can afford it, to opt back in, because you've technically taken a pay cut.
I think to round up things, Andy, I think that there's never been such an important time to have a financial plan in place, to work with an advisor through that, to listen and to take on board what they say, because we are undoubtedly in uncertain times. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, never mind in 2 or 3 years' time. How do people get in touch with you? How do they get to sit down with you and discuss and plan?
Very simply, give me a call on my mobile, which is 07969 192 923. Or you can email me at andy@eastmillsltd.co.uk. Effectively, we always give an initial consultation at our cost. So no matter what happens, you could decide at that point, you know what, I've already spoken to you about what I need to. Thanks very much. Goodbye. Or you wish to proceed with East Mills, at which point we'll tell you what's going to happen next. And if there are any fees, what they will be. And you will know all of that before you agree to sign anything.
Thank you very much for joining me today. It's a really interesting market at the moment. Let's hope we do avoid the doomsday that people are predicting, because obviously we need steady markets out there across the world, because no doubt that one market does affect the other. We wish you all the best. If you do have a pension or investment that you want Andrew to look at, please get in touch with him. Thank you for joining us today, Andrew. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you very much, Ben. You too.